mean, sensitive skin didn't even exist as a term in the 1970s. It started with reactions to PABA sunscreens.
Welcome to Skin as It Should Be, the podcast that takes an unfiltered look at skincare and the science behind it. With master chemist Trevor Steyn and creative professional Geoff Paton. Today we're discussing why 70% of people now have sensitive skin and what you can do about it.
70% of people now have sensitive skin. I mean, that's a staggering number if you believe it. So I'm really interested to know, is there some substance behind this number, or is it just another reported social media kind of exercise to get us all feeling a little bit of fear?
So, I mean, for the first thing is it's a self-assessment questionnaire. So you've got to take it with at least some salt. But yeah, the figure's around 71%. It depends on which country you look at. So the UK is a little bit lower, US is a bit higher there. But yeah, generally for men, somewhere between 50 to 70, and for women, somewhere between 60 and 85. Those are sensible figures. What was quite interesting is they did a study at Oktoberfest, and they looked at 2,700 people, just stopped them randomly, and dermatologists looked at them, and 64% of them, they found a diagnosable inflammatory skin condition. So, and most of the people hadn't actually gone for treatment for these, but although a lot of them had. But yeah, I think 64% of a population with diagnosable inflammatory skin condition is pretty damn high.
Yeah, it does seem high. Although beer might have played a factor.
Yeah, maybe just inflammatory people do go to beer fests or beer causes.
Exactly. But that's a huge number. I mean, we shouldn't take that lightly, right? So even with a little margin for error there, that number is really, really big. And has this prevalence of sensitive skin grown in recent years? Because it seems like it must have.
Yeah, I mean, sensitive skin didn't even exist as a term in the 1970s. It started with reactions to PABA sunscreens. And then by 1987, they were calling it cosmetic intolerance syndrome. So, it was a kind of 90s thing where sensitive skin really became a condition. And I mean, you're looking even 20 years ago in the early 2000s, the figures, they vary a little bit, but between 37 and 46% were the sensitive skin rates. So in the last 2 decades, things have shot up. And those were also self-assessments, by the way. So, at least we're comparing apples with apples there. It's worrying, I think. I'm fortunate enough not to have sensitive skin, but, and it's something, as a population, it should be catching people's attention by now. You look at people living traditional lifestyles, those figures are very low. And even today in farming communities, sensitive skin's way less prevalent than it is in urban communities. And if you look at hunter-gatherer communities, that the figure's effectively zero. There's nobody going around going, oh, I have sensitive skin as a hunter-gatherer. And you might say, oh, they've got bigger problems, but actually they live pretty well. They do what we do when we go on holiday. They go for walks in nature with people they love and trust. It's like a pretty good lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. We only do that once a year.
Yeah.
Just on that, just a question on that self-assessment. Is that how's the self-assessment done? What kind of things would they ask? And is it a reliable source? So would they just it would be basically, how does your skin feel? Or how would they ask how would they conduct a survey like that?
Yeah, I guess a lot of it has to do with reaction to product. And that's the thing with sensitive skin, is that it's not red or irritable all the time. But when exposed to an external factor, perhaps hot water, perhaps product, perhaps a plant, or, then it reacts in a not very measured way. It's hyperreactive. So that it's indicative of subclinical inflammation. So a level of inflammation that is not diagnosable as you have erythema, or you have it's a level of underlying inflammation that is present in most modern lifestyle people. And I think from what I could find in the literature, it's way more common on the face than in other parts of the body. You obviously see in childhood atopic dermatitis being particularly prevalent in the, in the more moisture areas, so armpits perhaps, or the junctions behind the knees, or inner elbows. But yeah, the face is the most common. And I think it's not a coincidence that that is the place that most cosmetic products go.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And also, if you talk about earlier the prevalence of men in sensitive skin, generally men would use less products, right? So you can start to draw your own conclusions.
Yeah. I think it is. I think it's more than likely product related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that in itself should be something for us to think long and hard about. But if someone's looking at this, you talk about self-assessment test. Most people wouldn't be looking at it from a clinical point of view. They just go, I have inflamed skin, or it's a bit red here. So what would you say would be the telltale signs of someone that has sensitive skin?
So I guess if if after a shower you're itchy, if there's, there's an irritation, an underlying irritability to the skin, there's the redness. That's often an indicative sign of a breakdown in barrier function. So yeah, there are pretty easy to notice metrics for people, but I think you've got to draw a line between what would be a clinical assessment where you're actually looking for inflammatory markers and other, and the more self-assessed, how does your skin feel? And I don't think, although it's not very scientific, I don't think you can ignore how skin feels to people, and if their skin is feeling itchy and tight and dry and not great, then I think we should listen.
Yeah. I mean, this correlation between then sensitive skin and products is obviously, in my head, it's becoming more and more clear. But people seem to use bad products for a while, and they don't seem to have any kind of ill effects. And then, suddenly they might see something. How does this work? Is that accurate? How would people use products for a while and then suddenly have sensitive skin, or do they have it from the beginning? But they wouldn't carry on using them if they had sensitive skin immediately, right? So, what is that correlation?
Yeah, it's very seldom that you'll use a product once. I mean, there are some sunscreen ingredients and others, and other ingredients where there's you use it once and then you go, "Ow, that hurt." It's something that would build up over time, generally, and it's a lot like the gut. And I mean the research in the gut microbiome is some distance ahead of where the research in the skin microbiome is. As I think I said last time, just because of the volume. I mean, there's so much microbial mass in fecal material in comparison to how much you sample when you do a swab of skin. So yeah, the tech to accurately sequence that's kind of new. And I guess, again, with the gut, if you're eating processed food and taking antibiotics, you deplete your gut microbiome. Everybody's kind of aware of these issues. And over time, you lose key partners. And because of losing those key partners, you start battling to maintain barrier function in the gut. So that causes what they call leaky gut. And then there really is this constant inflammation, this underlying immune activity, because you've got stuff coming across the barrier, microbes that shouldn't be there. Then your immune system's constantly being activated, and it is in this inflammatory state. And it's actually the white blood cells break down barrier function so that they can get out there and control that infection. And it shouldn't be happening. Your microbiome should be the interface between you and the outside world. But when the microbiome's depleted, then your immune system has to step up to maintain the populations of microbes at the interface. So it's a double whammy, really. Like, your immune system does damage, breaks barrier function so that it can exit and get things under control. And it's pretty much exactly with skin, the same thing. You've you've depleted the skin microbiome, you've broken down barrier function, you've altered pH. There's there are a whole lot of factors.
Yeah, there's going to be a reaction.
Yeah, and then you break down barrier function because you've lost some key microbial partners, and now the immune system's just constantly activating. And I mean, we all remember from COVID, it's your immune system that kills you, not the virus. So the immune system does a lot of collateral damage.
Okay. So I mean, just from a layman's point of view, you could, if someone is using a product and it feels great, you could, and it's a bad product, you could be using this product, it could feel great, your skin could look good for a while, and then suddenly you start to have a build-up of a reaction, all the things you've talked about. Is that kind of from a consumer point of view, could that be an accurate way? So, just because people might not always see the effects of sensitivity immediately, they could be using something and it could be feeling and looking great, and then suddenly they hit the cliff and it's off,
Yeah, that's a great question. Think about an occlusive lip product that includes petroleum jelly. Generally, there's something. You travel or there's a sudden dry patch and you think, oh, perhaps I'll use some petroleum jelly on my lips, and then you apply that. It's not long, probably 4 or 5 hours, and you're going to need more because the signaling shifts, right? Your lips would have been increasing oil production because they did perceive that dry, a drop in humidity, and oil production would have increased to account for it. But you stepped in and put an occlusive product on. And so your lips went, oh, okay, I got it wrong. Everything's okay on the top now. So the increase in oil production didn't come. And that creates dependence on this product because the signaling shifts. And that's true of a lot of products. You end up dependent on the product because you've shifted the signaling to skin.
And if you had sort of dry lips in the first place that made you want to use it, what would have caused that in the first place?
That's why I said it's normally a trigger. So there's normally, like for me, when I get on an airplane, I land in Johannesburg or I land in Europe in winter.
Environmental.
And I mean, there's a massive shift between Durban and, I mean, it's humid here. And then there's a shift. So it might even be the onset of winter and my lips haven't quite caught up yet, and there might be a moment, and skin's the same, by the way. It's not just isolated to lips, but there'll be a trigger, and then a slight shift, and I mean, I know I've just got to live through 2 days of relatively dry lips, which I'm prepared to do. Instead of intervening, or at least intervene understanding, is the other thing. So if you are going to intervene, then intervene with something that is actually nutritive. The petroleum jelly feeds nothing. It's from petroleum.
That's a barrier, right? So
yeah, it is completely occlusive, and I mean that's been sitting in the bowels of the earth as crude oil for a very, very long time. All the nutrients gone. So, although there are like niche microbes that can digest that oil, they certainly don't occur on your skin. And so you're not feeding your skin microbiome with that oil. So at least if you are going to supplement with an oil that your skin microbes might expect. And then understand that you can supplement with the oil and then ease off, whether it's by interval. So in other words, perhaps initially you're putting it on every 4 hours to once a day to twice a day to once a day. And then, or in intensity. So maybe using 4 drops to start off with, then 3, then 2, then 1, so that you don't go off a cliff and then have some sort of a relapse reaction. Give your skin a chance to catch up, and then take the intervention away.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, that link to product starting to become more and more clear. So I guess one of the questions I have in my head is how many people actually were born with sensitive skin, and how many people are, developing reactions over time. So there must, because sensitive skin is a category, it's growing. It's obvious that it's growing for a reason. But there must be people surely that have that from birth, or are more environmentally sensitive. So what is, what those two groups, how big are they?
I think the number of people, there are genetic conditions that predispose you to some sort of sensitivity, and there are certainly immune conditions that are genetically linked. But honest to goodness, the number of people that are born with sensitive skin should be pretty damn close to zero. I think what we're seeing is two separate, well, they're not separate, but the two effects, at least two effects. One is the incentive behind skincare companies to drive dependence. Dependence brings sales. So, again, to run a crude analogy, you have a tropical rainforest with huge diversity, large numbers of species. That tropical rainforest doesn't need external input. It doesn't need constant input in order to be maintained, and it's pretty resilient. It can go through storms and earthquakes and fires and whatever, and it'll handle that. But if you deplete that and strip it down and plant wheat, that thing's constantly going to need input. It's going to need pesticides, watering. It's going to need constant pest management and fungicides, and there's going to be constant input required. One of those generates zero profit, and the other is highly profitable. So I think that's one effect. The other effect that I think we're seeing is the slow generational decay in the diversity of our skin microbiome. And what I mean by generational decay is that it's, if you look at skincare regimes today, sure, they're more complex than they were in the 1970s. But our parents still used surfactants and products with preservatives. They were in the prime better living through chemistry phase. The thing that was happening with our parents, though, is that their parents at least had an almost full complement. They had almost all their microbial partners still. The kind of crazy washing and drive towards huge cosmetic use really started in the 50s. So our parents' immune system still at least recognized a whole lot of microbial partners. So when we came along, though, we were inheriting a diminished set of microbes from our parents, but we also didn't have the immune recognition for the old ones. And I think we've compounded that now in our kids unwittingly.
I didn't realize that's something I didn't realize. So if you're talking about, I get the idea of microbes being in contact with nature, diverse microbes, but there's also a certain portion of inherited. So what happens over time if we continue on this trend? What happens to our, I don't know if we could call it microbial base?
Yeah, it's kind of scary. We were witnessing in global ecosystems one of the large extinction events, one of the largest ever. But on skin and in ourselves, we're seeing something similar. It's like this war on germs that we declared it's not trivial, and we're in serious danger of losing a lot of these partners forever. Because reintroducing them is not so easy, right? Like your immune system, my immune system probably doesn't even recognize some of the co-curia species that our parents had. So when we try to reintroduce it, it goes, whoa, who's this? And attacks. So it's going to take multiple repeat interactions with this microbe before it's accepted as part of our microbiome. And the Finns are at the head of this drive where they've recognized that we're in serious danger of losing these things and are starting to build libraries of them, and are also like heading up we need to change things. Like we can't carry on obliterating these key partners.
And I can imagine with that, it must be probably beyond skin, right? It's also about gut microbiome and any
course.
microbial partner.
Of course.
So this is not just about skin. Skin is part of it. It's happening on skin, which is why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing, but it's also happening in our bodies and quite scary.
Yeah, the reason I'm blurting on about, well, obviously I'm blurting on about skin because that's what we do. But the skin is particularly sensitive to antibiotic courses. So if you look at how the gut recovers, the gut's not completely back, but it's largely back on track after 2 or 3 weeks after a course of antibiotics. Skin's taking much longer. And I don't think anyone's too certain why. But the skin's taking like months, like 2 months, 6 months. It's a long haul toward getting your skin back on track. And people very seldom make that connection. Like, oh, I took an antibiotic, and 4 weeks later I started having skin trouble. They're not putting that together very often. They go, oh, I've got a runny tummy because I was on antibiotics. That's kind of, they put that together. But the knock-on skin effects are not something that people intuitively place.
Sure. Okay. It's a scary thought beyond skincare. But now, just in terms of industrial skincare, what we call industrial skincare, which is all the products that you have a lovely fondness for, how have those specifically contributed to this? Because we talk about, lifestyle. Our parents obviously probably had more of an outdoor lifestyle, less urbanization. So I can imagine urbanization and things have contributed. But industrial skincare specifically, how has it contributed into this whole sad state of affairs?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned the 1970s better living through chemistry, but it started before then, and it was really that fear-based marketing around germs. And, in the late 1800s, you had the identification of germs as the agents of disease, and I mean, even Pasteur had a massive cautionary, line where he was going, hey, these guys are not all bad. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of microbes that are actually damaging in any way to a human, like less than 0.01%. So, but you had this association of germs, of bacteria, viruses with disease. And it was just too easy, I think, to profit from that, to go, think about your kids. Better clean them up nicely after a day in the dirt. Those kids are in danger. The germs are going to get them. And they can sell soap that way, right? And they can sell other, and then it kind of escalated from soap to, to more disinfectant-oriented products. And yeah, I mean, those are obviously going to damage a microbiome. Another effect is just the preservation in a cosmetic product. So, I mean, if you use very harsh preservatives, those preservatives are killing microbes in the product. So they're obviously going to do that when you put it on your face. So yeah, I guess that was one of the others. And then, as I was saying earlier, there's the strip and replace approach. So, you strip all the surface microbiome off with harsh surfactants, and then make an attempt to replace with something. And what's used often to replace with is a petrochemical or a cheap vegetable oil that's not particularly nutritive or not nutritive in the right way, and you end up creating dependence, and that's it's obviously not a good result. And then you go down the inflammatory cascade. You have a breakdown in barrier function. You've got high transepidermal water loss, and then people apply more and more and more. And I guess that's Western civilization for you, more and more and more.
Yeah.
And I get the whole way through, it's being sold as anti-aging and beautifying. It's
I think that's the key, right? Yeah. I mean, there are desperate needs out there like anti-aging, and there's also the kind of prevalence of liking the feeling of clean skin and those things that we've come accustomed to. That's a quite hard habit to change.
That's for sure. Yeah, and I think I sort of look back and at the early 2008 through to 2015 with the Human Microbiome Project, and sort of wonder how that messaging has taken so long to come through. I mean, it's been a decade of the gut. I suppose the gut message coming through, people understanding, eat whole food, avoid antibiotics if you can. But take a step back and you look at antibiotic usage, it's still almost on an exponential curve. It's going up very strongly. Look, there are isolated countries where it's starting to come down, but not common. So I think, that Human Microbiome Project messaging, it's kind of sad to see it almost being perverted a little bit now. The message, I just found that message beautiful. Look, I didn't find it beautiful to start off with. I got quite annoyed. But as a chemist, I trained for 8 years as an organic chemist, and largely in drug discovery, and now you get told that the thing you've been treating isn't a single species; it's an ecology of hundreds of thousands of species.
Which means everything you've been creating is probably not what you thought it was.
Yeah, exactly. You take a single molecule and you put it into a complex ecosystem. You shouldn't be surprised when you have unintended consequences. So But I think there's a beautiful message underlying that Human Microbiome Project that things are a lot more complex than we thought they were.
Yeah, I think a lot of you talk about a beautiful message, but we a lot of what we hear is what follow the money. It's one of the best expressions I've ever heard in recent years. If you're talking politics, follow the money. If you're talking in drug discovery, follow the money. Right. So to me, it makes a lot of sense that you don't hear that message as much as the things that make companies money. Which is kind of part of the reason for you wanting to do these podcasts, I imagine. But now if people are listening to this and at a very personal level, there's quite a lot of complex information out there. And it's quite, if you've got a routine or you've had a certain way of doing things, you probably struggle with all of this. So what strategies would you give people that have sensitive skin to cope with them a little bit better?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to just look at your barrier function. You get barrier function under control. You stop losing moisture through your skin. Skin feels better already. It's obviously just bear in mind that antibiotics courses are going to have a negative impact. It's a weird conundrum. We're in we're in a state where we have a depleted microbiome, both in gut, in lungs, in oral, everywhere. So we're more likely to need the odd antibiotic course as an intervention. But honestly, if you can try and build the microbiome to the point where you need minimal, then that's obviously a better space to be in. On skin, choosing pH balanced products is pretty damn key. In the industry, you see a lot of cleansers saying, "Oh, pH balanced," but actually, you don't really care about your cleanser. Well, you do, but what you really care about is the product that's left on the skin and that drives pH for a longer time. And it's difficult to maintain emulsions at low pH. Actually, took us some time. So a lot of products are pH at around 7. Skin's pH should be around 4.5, and that's quite a big gap from a microbial point of view. From a microbial point of view, pretty much anything can grow at pH 7. Not that much can grow at pH 4.5. You've got lactobacilli and skin microbes like Cutibacterium and staph. Those are happy at that pH. But if you're constantly shoving your pH towards 7, you're creating an environment that suits opportunists. And you don't want that. You want your tightly knit little team on your side here.
Yeah, absolutely.
As I said before, the harsh preservatives, what we're seeing a bit in the industry is that, companies are going, paraben free, no harsh surfactants, but the paraben free ones are often going toward the formaldehyde releasing preservatives that they were using before parabens. I mean, they stopped those for a reason. They're shaky, so.
So gone backwards.
Yeah, a little bit. And people don't know to look for those, right? So it's kind of like playing whack-a-mole for the end client. It's like, you go, parabens are a problem. Oh, okay, parabens are a problem. I won't use those anymore. And then it's like, oh, well, geez, I always battle to say this one. Imidazolidinyl urea. Those formaldehyde releases are tough. And now the client's going to look, they can't even say the thing, or I can't, and they're looking for these weird ingredients to avoid. So it's hard to understand, like, which preservatives mustn't I expose my microbiome to? But the preservatives are a driver. Look, what's kind of interesting is that you have two microbiomes. I mean, very crudely, you've got one microbiome that sits on the surface, and you've got another microbiome that sits in your pores, so in the pilosebaceous unit. Accessing the microbiome that's in the pores is not so easy. So altering that microbiome's actually pretty stable over time, but the surface microbiome's much less stable, and that's the one that's sensitive to preservatives and other non-pH products. So obviously anything that foams, I've got a mild problem with. Why
foam?
So I think it's a product of a marketing campaign that was too successful. I haven't used a foaming product. I mean, other than if I get grease on my hands or something, but I haven't used a foaming product for a very long time now. And when I tell people that, I get a 50-50 response. Around about 50% of people go, okay, what do you wash with? And I just go, well, I wash with warm water. And they go, yeah, all right. The other half go, ew.
Yeah.
And take a step back, And I mean, just put yourself back in 1900. It's only 125 years ago, but that wasn't the response from anybody then. It was like, you're clean. I mean, we're ridiculously clean in comparison to those folk, but like you're clean when there's no obvious dirt on you. And I haven't had anybody look at my face and go, geez, you dirty dude. I mean, water seems to do a pretty decent job given my particularly soft lifestyle of sitting behind a computer or in a lab. Water does a pretty good job of keeping me clean. And I don't feel like I need to see foam in order to be and feel clean. And as a matter of fact, when I was busy quitting soap, I found that if I used soap, I stank for like 3 days afterwards. So it's a culture of dependence. We're using
quitting soap. You make it sound like quitting smoking.
Yeah,
but it's pretty much the same thing, really.
Yeah, it is a bit, I guess. But okay. Yeah, and I mean, I guess other things to avoid. The microbiome is deeply complex. You've got on your skin thousands of strains, and you're going to go and throw a whole lot of synthetics in there. You shouldn't be surprised if things start falling apart a little. We've seen it in global ecosystems. If you pollute them, things collapse, and you get to a whole new normal. But it's not just product, obviously. I mean, there's lifestyle. The stuff we eat changes the oil that we produce on skin, both in quantity and quality. So we shouldn't be surprised to see skin conditions start deteriorating if our diets start falling apart. And then there's exercise and lifestyle. I mean, if you're not getting into nature a little bit, you're not going to have what are called transient microbes. And Every transient microbe that passes by your skin is an opportunity to acquire a new partner. And we are not putting ourselves in great space for doing that. We operate in small rooms where there's very little for microbes to eat. That's why you see, you've seen my office. It's like, you need a push knife to get in there. It's like, so I'll try and put myself in space where at least I'm exposed to microbial.
So you're actually giving decor advice here as well. Add plants to your home. Practically.
Or get dogs to go out and fetch microbes for you and then come lick them on your face.
So there you go. That happens a lot, by the way, especially where I'm from. People will treat their dogs like their family. And that's why I always send my daughter through the forest to get to the McDonald's to balance out the microbe loss. No jokes aside. So there's actually quite a lot you can do to intervene, right? Small practical steps, and actually a lot of what you're talking about is actually good for your body generally as well, walks in nature and all that. We know the benefits of those things. So, but now just get practical with people and say, give us some advice on how you would change your routine to accommodate some of this thinking that we've talked about today. What would you do to help change those routines?
Yeah, I think the first thing to change is this double cleanse thing. If you're not wearing makeup or sunscreen, there's not really much reason to cleanse with a foaming product. And as a matter of fact, I think in the mornings you shouldn't cleanse at all. Just use lukewarm water. One thing to bear in mind is that sebum's melting point is 32 degrees Celsius. It's a beautifully constructed lipid mix. At temperatures above 32, you need sebum to be liquid, so that it can disperse sweat easily. So sweat would otherwise bead and fall off, and you don't want that. At temperatures above 32, you want even distribution of sweat so that you can lose heat effectively. And at temperatures lower than 32, sebum solidifies to become a wax and protect you more effectively. So if you go and take a shower at 45 degrees or 50 degrees in water temperature, you're losing a lot of sebum. And you actually are going to have to, even in the absence of a cleanser, you're going to have to probably try to replace that with something. But in the mornings, that's why I say if you can use lukewarm water in the mornings, and cleanse with water, that's a pretty good start. And then in the evenings you can cleanse with a cream-based cleanser that gets makeup and sunscreen off. Exfoliation, it's something that should be done infrequently. And when I say infrequently, probably like 6 monthly, maybe once a quarter. The idea that you can throw an AHA into a product for daily use, yeesh, that's creating dependence at a whole new level. There you're just training skin to go into hyperproduction. You're effectively callousing yourself. You're stripping skin away and you're fighting the callus response, because skin is going to try and maintain its thickness, right? So the rate of cell division will increase to try and keep that thickness there. And then every day you're stripping it with an AHA. It's a pretty bad situation to be in, because when you stop, then skin is actually going to callus. Your wrinkles are going to look awful for a while.
It's probably going to dock with a few people when you start bringing them to aging. How often do people generally exfoliate though?
People are not going to do it every day sometimes, with these daily products with daily AHAs. But in general, it's a weekly, I guess, or the recommendation's a lot more frequent. I would say maybe monthly, but preferably once every 2 or 3 months.
Because that's another thing that people have been taught, right? Which is this idea about getting rid of the dead skin cells is a good thing, which, like you say, might be good once in a while with build-up, but not daily.
Yeah, daily's crazy, I think. Like, who's going to exfoliate their skin in a hunter-gatherer environment? I mean, that's a skincare routine, man. Like, you go down to the river, you clean yourself. And they did that daily. I mean, humans are fastidious. It's not like we don't like being dirty naturally. That's why that marketing campaign was so effective. It's because we naturally have a desire to be clean, and we do judge people for being dirty. Yeah, I think that walk down to the river, wash yourself with microbe-rich water from a river. That's hopefully pollutant free. It's a pretty good skincare routine. Yeah.
If you can find that river.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, okay, a lot of this might seem quite radical to people out there, but if you had to say, stop one thing, what could make a big difference, what would that one thing be?
Protect your sebum, I would say. Like the natural oils on your skin are, they're really impressive. They feed such a tiny little niche of microbial life. Our partners, it's a little bit like the clownfish and the anemone. Anemones are pretty damn nasty for other fish, but the clownfish can operate quite comfortably there. Our skin oils are pretty damn nasty for the average microbe, and yet we feel like we can just dump them off all the time and then replace them with some man-made alternative. It's like trying to replace breast milk. It's not going to happen in the near future. It's and I think just think about any product that can protect that surface microbiome and the sebum that supports it.
Yeah. So if you make some changes, what are the benefits you'll start to see in a changed regime, and how do you formulate for that?
So, as soon as your barrier function improves, the underlying moisturization improves. And as soon as the underlying moisturization improves, you'll see skin looking plumper, you'll see wrinkles looking less obvious, less sagging in the skin. There's, there are obvious benefits to improved barrier function. What they call the glow, which actually is just the look of healthy skin. Although that's attempts are being made to mimic that as best possible. But and from a formulation point of view, again in the industry you see, this mimics sebum. Our mimics sebum in the crudest possible way sometimes. Mimicking sebum is a lot like mimicking breast milk. It's damn near impossible. But we've spent a very long time on isolating sapienic acid. It's called sapienic acid because it only occurs on humans, and no other mammal produces it. And we only produce it on skin, not in any of our internal tissues. It's actually toxic to our internal tissues. So if we figure that if a human being at great metabolic cost is holding these strange genes that allow the production of this sapienic acid on skin, and sapienic acid is the dominant fatty acid on skin, well, then that's the first step toward mimicking sebum. So we spent 5 years finding a source of sapienic acid. It's produced by a pretty weird little vine that we grow in Tanzania on the slopes of Mount Meru. And this vine produces these tiny little seeds that have a very annoying habit, that the seed dispersal mechanism is that these pods burst and they throw the seeds like 5 meters away. And the seeds are tiny. So we've come up with a few different techniques of collecting these. Either you put an empty tea bag over the pod so that when it explodes, you get your 2 seeds, or you use other techniques to collect, like shade cloth or whatever. But we've I think done good work there. We've also done some good breeding, so we've got the level of sapienic acid really high in those seeds now. And now we've got a decent supply chain. We can start using that sapienic acid in product, and we are starting to deploy it now in product. The other thing we're looking at in skin, and it's been a big thing in gut health for quite a long time, is short chain fatty acids. These acids have the ability to calm the immune system, and that calming of the immune system immediately gives you an opportunity to rebuild barrier function if you can reinstate the microbiome. So that's another thing that we're looking at, and the two that we're particularly interested in are propionic acid and butyric acid. Propionic acid is produced in relatively large quantities by our skin microbiome. Propionibacterium acnes was named that because it produces propionic acid, and that's the dominant microbe on human skin. Our skin's expecting to see these short-chain fatty acids. Downside is that they don't smell great, but we've found masking techniques now that are surprisingly effective. Antimicrobial peptides are another big aspect. Your skin microbes produce these. It's like this constant war going on your skin. Because you're coming across microbes from all over the place. So, the mechanism of warfare is often these antimicrobial peptides. Your skin microbes will produce these peptides that are toxic to incoming microbes. So we sometimes leverage those, isolate those antimicrobial peptides, and apply them to skin to keep pathogens out. But honestly, it seems super crude, but pH is the easiest way to favor commensal microbes. They're used to living at pH 5, which is pretty acidic. Your skin's called the acid mantle for a reason. It's acidic. And we disrupt that. The average body wash is not even close to pH balanced. And soap is like next level wild in terms of pH. The average bar of soap out there is pH 10 or 11. It's awful. Take your skin like 24 hours to recover from one usage. So, if I could get rid of anything, I'd probably be bloody soap. Yeah.
That might be hard for some to swallow, but yeah, I get the point. The soap, the thing that's kept us going for.
Yeah. Look, I want my surgeon to use soap. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So it has its time and place. It's just, again, managing it. Just don't am I wrong in saying some skincare companies promote like a higher pH as the level you should have?
I haven't seen a lot of that, but it's just that
higher than 4. Yeah, or 4.5.
So, what you see as people age is that, like a very young kid would have a pH of around 4.3 to 4.5. And then as you age, your pH drifts. Your skin pH ends up somewhere around 5.5 by the time you're 70 or so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I could summarize this podcast, it would really be the fact that we have an industrial skincare hangover from hell, and we need to change our routines to reduce sensitivity and inflammation. Does that about sum it up?
Yeah, pretty much. I think we haven't ended up here by dint of some premeditated plot from some evil people. It's just been a process, I guess. I think, as I said, people have this tendency to believe that they're born dirty somehow, and that we need cleaning. I think it's time to rearrange that thinking. We just didn't know before how important germs were, and we didn't know that we'd somehow declared war on ourselves when we declared war on germs. So I think, I think there's new knowledge now, and there's an opportunity to do less better. I stole that from you shamelessly. I've applied it to many areas in my life. Yeah, and I think that's definitely true in skin. If you're going to intervene, pay attention. Don't intervene with 10 products. Intervene with 2 well thought through, considered products. And I think that it'd serve people well in general. Yeah.
Talking about doing less better, if you had to say, if people have skipped to the end of this podcast and you had to say 3 things quickly, what 3 things would you leave them with?
3 products.
Or just 3 things around this idea of sensitive skin to remember?
Yeah, start off with a period of doing nothing. If you have sensitive skin, try water for a couple of weeks, and then when you intervene, pay attention. I think cream-based cleansers when you need them, because I don't think makeup's going anywhere, and you need to take that off. And I think look for the simplest possible product. I mean, if you see, for example, what we've done with Prescript, we've simplified it into an oil and an aqueous serum. And we did that with intent, because that's the way to build a near perfect product, is to craft an oil and craft an aqueous phase, because there's some actives that dissolve in oil, there's some actives that dissolve in water. You do want some actives. Evolution's a little bit brutal in that it doesn't really care about how you look after you're 50 or so, because reproductive days are pretty much done by then. But I'm over 50 and I still somehow care a little bit, even though I try to look like I don't. So I think intervening with actives is something that we're probably going to certainly have to do as we get older. But it's just to intervene in the most sensible and sustainable way. So anything I do now that's short term is going to come and bite me at some point. So
it won't just bite you in the ass.
Yeah, straight in the face.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, great! Thank you, Trevor. This has been a super interesting topic, and I hope that everyone listening has skin that's in a slightly better mood.
Cool. Thanks, Geoff.
Cool.
Thanks for coming out to the colonies.
Awesome.